Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today's review, we are taking a look at the Berry from Clash Discs. As we always do, let's go ahead and start things off with the profile and the feel of the Berry. There is a gradual roundness to the shoulder, so it doesn't make it feel incredibly deep, but it's not the shallowest feeling mid-range either, kind of right in the middle. And when it comes to the flight plate, it's not super flat, but it's not super domey either. It's kind of that nice, just kind of semi-dome, kind of meets right in the middle, but I'm sure you probably could find either slightly domier versions as well as flatter versions. Also in the hand, the Berry feels amazing. The inner lip is rounded, so it doesn't dig into your hand, both forehand or into your fingers for backhand. The plastic itself, it's very flexible, very grippy, an incredibly smooth feel. It's so easy to manipulate the flight plate, as I have no trouble at all pinching the flight plate between my thumb and my pointer finger. Overall, I'm just always impressed with the steady plastic from Clash. Just one of the best feeling, grippy premium plastics on the market today. And for the flight numbers, the Berry, speed 5, glide 5, turn -1, and a fade of 1. Now, I will say, for the most part, the flight numbers are pretty accurate, but as you're going to see, it's going to depend on your arm speed. I feel that that fade could maybe be a 1.5, maybe a 2, if you're a slower arm like me. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at the flight of the Berry. Now, when thrown on a hyzer, it is going to want to hold that hyzer angle. Doesn't quite want to flip up to flat. Maybe just a little bit of flip, but it doesn't quite get to flat. And then as it slowed down, it had a little bit harsher of a finish than I was expecting. Even when I rip into this flat, it's going to get, I don't really want to say a lot of turn. It gets just a very gentle little bit of drift in the mid-flight before, again, about 2/3 of the way through the flight, it's going to kind of level itself out and come back into a hard finish. Same thing when thrown on an anhyzer line. I can actually trust that this is going to fight its way out of most anhyzer lines. It's not going to hold that anhyzer all the way to the ground unless you're a really big arm. For the most part, if I threw it on an anhyzer angle, it's going to start on that angle, but then about 2/3 to 3/4 of the flight, but then it's going to check up and have a pretty dumpy finish. One thing I was actually quite surprised about, though, is that the Berry can handle torque very well when it comes to forehand. I was not expecting it to, because in the mid-flight it has that understability. Well, I was really surprised that I could throw this with just a little bit of hyzer and rip into it with my forehand, and it flips up to flat, holds really straight, and then it has a good hyzer finish at the very end. And then even when thrown flat, it does get a bit of turn, but again, it's good for like almost a flex around something, as it starts on the turn and then it checks up, and then it has kind of that dumpy finish, as almost as you're kind of seeing here with the anhyzer line. Same thing with the forehand here. Starts out, holds that turn, and then about 2/3 of the way through the flight here, it starts to check up and then just has that nice dumpy finish. And with a surprising amount of torque resistance, makes the Berry very good for both backhand and forehand throwers. Alright, let's go ahead, take a look at the Berry out on the course. This hole, it's a pretty simple, just stock hyzer. And I mentioned earlier that the Berry doesn't quite flip up all the way to flat when thrown on a hyzer, and potentially leaving you out of bounds. With this, you can trust that it's going to hold that arcing hyzer and swing you back into the fairway. For this hole, you have 2 gaps that you have to hit, and then it has to still continue to push forward. Now, in a hyzer, the Berry is not really going to push forward very well, but when thrown flat, it's going to allow it to keep pushing forward. It's not going to have that dumpy finish if you do put it on that kind of flatter line and keep it a little bit lower. This shot is very much like the first one. However, I'm going to be throwing this one flat to show you that it gets just that little bit of turn in the early mid-flight, and then has that predictable finish at the end even when thrown low. As I say, the fade on this is more than I was expecting it. With this, I know it's going to kind of hold the turn to the gap, and then it's going to check up and dump pretty quickly. So I'm going to start it on that anhyzer line, and then as it gets towards the basket, it's not going to fully turn over. I know it's going to flatten out and then have a little bit of a hyzer finish. At the moment, when it comes to the different plastic types, I only know that the Berry comes in the Steady and the Sunny version, and I apologize, I don't have it in the Sunny version, so I wasn't able to really compare how that is, but just from experience, Sunny does tend to be a little bit more on the overstable side. So let's get into the lefty lines, and I'm going to be comparing the Berry against a few other kind of straight to semi overstable mid-ranges like the EMAC Truth from Dynamic Discs and the Buzz from Discraft. Overall, I was surprised how similar all three of these discs actually flew to each other. I will say the Berry was just slightly more understable than, say, the EMAC Truth and the Buzz. The EMAC Truth was actually probably the furthest flying of the three consistently, and also held straighter longer than the other two, while the Buzz was consistently the most overstable. But again, when it comes to the Buzz, since it comes out in so many different plastic types and so many different runs, it's really going to be dependent on which one you choose. The one I was throwing here was a brand new ESP Buzz. And when it came to the EMAC Truth, it was just regular Lucid with that kind of tie-dye coloring. Overall, I was genuinely shocked by the Clash Discs Berry. It was not what I was expecting. Yes, it has a semi-understable flight for players with slower medium arms, as the flight numbers would suggest. However, the torque resistance that it had, it made this thing very good for forehands as well as for backhands. You can work it on so many different lines. It's not going to hold a turnover all the way to the ground unless you're a really big arm, but you can still put it on a lot of those slight turnover to overstable mid-range shots. Just all around a fantastic mid-range to have in your lineup. And be sure to visit GreatLakesDisc.com, use code LEFTY to save on your next order of discs. Till the next one, keep banging chains.